Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 news. After a horrendous weekend in Brazil, Lewis Hamilton's made it very clear exactly why he's leaving Mercedes for Ferrari next season, saying of all the cars that Mercedes have made over the last couple of years and all the upgrades they have brought, this current version of the W15 that he was driving this past weekend was the worst one that he's ever been delivered in this ground effect era, even worse than the horrible bouncing of that W13. Clearly, with Ferrari making a good direction right now, Hamilton's made a good decision here, but what does it mean for Mercedes if this keeps up, with Russell and Antonelli leading the line over there next year? Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Plenty to get into. Couple of updates on yesterday's Grand Prix results. Lando Norris did not receive a penalty in the end for, well, moving off the line when it wasn't yet green after the Lance Stroll just drove into the gravel inexplicably. So he got a reprimand and a €5,000 fine. This was the same as Russell and the other two guys, obviously like Tsunoda was third, right? The others that were involved in this, they were not penalised because they followed the guys in front, basically was how the stewards decided it, which seems, again, it's one of these stewarding decisions. It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but it's another one that you look at and you think, well, hang on a second, is this really reasonable? And like, how will we come to this decision that for the front two guys, because for Russell, you could also argue that, well, like Norris pulled away, so then Russell pulled away, and therefore it was also Norris's fault. But no, the other drivers basically were let go because they responded to Norris and obviously Russell in front. But yet the drivers further back, who didn't go anywhere, they were fine anyway, and they weren't even called into question. So it's all a bit dramatic. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Mercedes were not disqualified. I thought that they might be, but no, Mercedes, Russell and Hamilton do get the points they got. Not many, but they did get some. A €5,000 fine for each incident, and like they tried to change the tyre pressures. The gate to access the grid was not immediately open. The FIA accepted that given the short notice, it was extremely difficult, if not impossible, for the teams to follow the procedure prescribed. So they basically got away with it. Red Bull are still trying to figure out their driver situation, and this weekend was potentially quite telling on that front because both Tsunoda and Lawson in the RBs had a very good time. And as Jos Verstappen then says, so this is interesting that Jos is saying it, just because we know that Jos, whether he should or shouldn't, plays an important part in that team dynamic over there at Red Bull. And Jos Verstappen says, I think Lawson's doing very well. It seems logical to me that he is facing the step up. I think let him finish the season there and give him confidence, then the team has to decide. But yeah, Lawson's done well. Look, obviously I rate Tsunoda pretty highly. I think they should have given him a chance, but to be fair to Lawson, if he can effectively match Tsunoda, if not outperform him marginally over these few rounds, given Tsunoda's experience in the team, I think that probably will be enough to prove to Red Bull that he deserves the drive. Of course, Perez clearly doesn't deserve the drive on merit as it stands, and Christian Horner says that Red Bull have got to look at the facts when it comes to his drive, and it's like, well, if you look at the facts, there's probably only one answer that you can feasibly come up with. His replacement, though, is another question. Of course, we know that Colapinto is in the discussion too, but to be fair for Colapinto, both Mexico and here in Brazil, two down weekends given the way that he started out. Obviously, like Singapore was phenomenal, Baku was phenomenal given the tricky conditions that he faced in those situations. The last two weekends not so much. Expected for a rookie, sure, but he's still got to earn his spot on the grid next year, and that's far easier said than done. And the problem is that, I mean, to be fair, it wasn't just Colapinto. Yes, he crashed a couple of times, but it was the Albon crash that was really the problem, because that car was total. That car was Sergio Perez versus Kevin Magnussen, Monaco 2024 levels of total dry. Like, that car was destroyed, and yeah, they could not fix it for the Grand Prix, obviously. So Williams have then said, yeah, like, getting that fixed in time is going to be a serious challenge here in terms of like spare parts, even producing enough parts to actually finish the season is going to be a problem. Now, look, they've got a few weeks until the next round in Las Vegas, so they should be able to get something to work, but man, if you're an engineer or a mechanic working for Williams, you're just seeing the cars go into the wall on like 2 hours of sleep, having got to the track at 4 in the morning on race day, and then seeing the car go into the wall again. You must be absolutely fuming. Let's talk about the championship battle, if there even is one. Verstappen obviously has now got it won, sewn up. Leclerc is officially out of the championship fight. There's no way for him to win in the final 3 rounds, enough points to overtake Max. It's still possible for Lando, but we know that it's over, basically. This was interesting. Like, I don't think Lando helps himself. We talked about it yesterday, some of his post-race comments that, of course, will have got everyone talking for various reasons. And I think it's the same thing here, really, when Lando was saying, oh, Red Bull were just way faster this weekend than we were. And look, the Red Bull definitely seemed to take a step. Maybe it was Max, I don't know, but it seemed like the Red Bull upgrades did work better here. Certainly the sprint I thought was quite telling, because Max clearly had the best pace, I would say, in the sprints. He was obviously held up for some time, which was not what I was necessarily expecting. And sure, it did seem like the Red Bull was very, good and comfortable in those conditions, but obviously, it takes a car and it takes a driver in unison, and that's why Norris's comments on, oh, well, Max got lucky. Well, yeah, sure, he got lucky with the red flag, but as I said yesterday, he earned that luck, and also he got unlucky in the qualifying session, so it's like, Lando got lucky to qualify P1 with Max in P17, and then, sure, Max got lucky with the red flag and the way that it all played out, but it's not luck that's decided this. Even great champions need a bit of luck from time to time to get over the line. Doesn't mean that they're not, great champions, great drivers, great talents. So, and I think many people are saying, and I do get it, that Lando's kind of had this coming to him, right? He's got to change his attitude to some degree. If Lando would have won this title, he would have been a deserving winner, because, to make that kind of comeback, fair enough. But in many respects, he didn't seem like a deserving drivers' champion this year with the way that he's driven, and I think nothing exemplified that in many respects more so than Brazil, that he's just not at that level yet. And I think the mentality is part of it. We know that Norris, in the days that Hamilton was dominating, was like, well, Hamilton's got the fastest car, he should win, right? It should be easy. Norris, of course, is finding out that it's not so easy as to having the fastest car and always executing right. There's clearly a level that Hamilton and Verstappen and obviously Alonso as well, to some degree, in his day. Maybe his day is still here or not far gone, right? But of course, the car isn't there to deliver right now. And of course, neither is Hamilton's, and we'll get to that in a second. But it was earlier in the season, and we saw what happened when Hamilton did have a car underneath him that was capable of winning races back in Silverstone and Spa, among a couple of others. But yeah, so this is the point, right? I think Lando doesn't do himself any favours in the media and also from his peers when he says, oh, well, Red Bull were faster than us, so that's why Max won. I said, well, it's not why Max won. Max just outperformed you categorically, which is why that he won the race, let's be honest. And there was a bit of drama as well. Max came in the press conference. You know that he's been talking all this about the British passport, basically saying the media's biased against him because he's not British. And look, I don't really know if I buy that. Maybe I'm biased myself. Fair enough. And I think there's a theory, I know that Kim Illman mentioned this on his video, that in the Netherlands, obviously, the coverage is massively pro-Verstappen, as you would expect it to be. So, maybe Max expects that in the UK it's similar. And to some degree it is, obviously. Obviously Sky Sports and the British media focus on the British drivers more than others. Is it as, one-sided as other countries? Maybe not. I mean, there's maybe a debate to be had on it. But anyway, Max has been talking about it, and seemingly some of the British guys weren't even there. So then he was obviously having a dig at it. Will Buxton then responded and said, he took a dig at us, basically. I've not been able to go to a post-race presser in years. I'm always on air. For print press, post-race is a hectic time of driver pen and ad hoc team boss interviews conducted in the paddock itself. So he kind of says a couple of things on this, and says that if you're, a British journalist, it makes more sense for you to go and interview Lewis, Lando and George elsewhere rather than go to the press conference with Ocon, Gasly and Verstappen. But of course, that gave Max more ammunition for the points that he's been making in recent times. But let's talk about the situation at Mercedes, and Hamilton especially, really, because of course he's not had a good season. Qualifying's been a disaster. We know that on some level he was always expected to find himself in a tricky spot like this, given that Russell is the de facto team leader basically for next year. He will be in on conversations that Hamilton isn't. If there's ever going to be preference on strategy or even on upgrade packages, Russell's going to get the preference there. This weekend's, they both had the new upgrades, but Hamilton had a different version of it. I'm pretty sure they said that they were doing some tweaks, and usually when they do tweaks, that means they give Hamilton the car that's experimental, basically the experimental car, and very, very rarely does it actually work, it seems, for Lewis. So I think that's probably what was going on this weekend, because watching the onboards, there's just no way that Hamilton is that much slower than Russell. There's just, I mean, the evidence doesn't suggest it over the course of the season, certainly not over the course of when the car was actually competitive, right? Because there was that stint where Mercedes are pretty good just before the summer break. They won 3 or 4 Grand Prix. Russell got lucky, but he won Austria. Hamilton won Silverstone on pure merit. Phenomenal weekend, phenomenal drive. And then the next day or the next weekend in Spa, or shortly afterwards in Spa anyway, Hamilton won again after Russell was disqualified, but could have been a Mercedes one too. And the Mercedes that weekend at Spa was like just legitimately the fastest car on pure pace. It was actually kind of mega. And they'd brought an upgrade to Spa, but it didn't quite work, so they went back to the Silverstone spec and they won the Grand Prix comfortably in the end. And it really did seem like Mercedes had got on top of things. They'd understood the problems, they know where to go to the next level with their car, they finally got on top of, okay, giving the car a solid base and then adding performance. It seemed like they'd done that, but after the summer break, it was all of a sudden an absolute nightmare again, and the Ferraris have leapfrogged them, the McLarens have leapfrogged them, the Red Bull has stayed ahead, and on some instances, the Haas has been faster than the Mercedes, and that's like genuinely true. Like Nico Hülkenberg here, P10 in the championship, like he has been occasionally just on pure pace faster than one of the Mercs at least. So it's a bit of a disaster from a team that expected to be competing for the championship this year and of course has been masquerading like they're going to sign Max Verstappen. But like if you're Max, yes, Red Bull might not be in the best spot on track behind the scenes. It's obviously not ideal over there. McLaren, Ferrari are arguably better places to be right now in Formula 1. But Mercedes is not exactly giving a compelling offer to Max, is it? I mean, earlier in the season, there wasn't much good to say from Mercedes. When they started winning races, that was potentially a good argument for Verstappen maybe to join Toto Wolff's team. But obviously now that's gone out the window entirely. And Hamilton, like the only highlight of the weekend really from him was driving Senna's McLaren, right? And, you know, he was absolutely loving this. It was a great time for the fans there and for Hamilton himself. And I think Hamilton, yes, he had a terrible weekend, but at least he could take away some positives from driving this car in front of the Brazilian fans. And also the fact that the weekend was over, as in he doesn't have to go and drive the W15 too many more times. Only a few more rounds until the end of the season. So, yeah, Hamilton made this very clear in his post-race analysis that he just can't wait for this to be over. Like, clearly mentally he's pretty checked out of the Mercedes project, and understandably, I know that he has made comments to the effect of, oh, well, you know, maybe I'll help the teams, they can try this, try that to improve the car, but really all he's interested in, can they improve the car for him in the final few rounds? If they can't, you know, obviously next year he doesn't want to help them too much for next year's W16, but the problem is for Mercedes that they've spent 3 years of these regs, and it doesn't seem like they're much closer to really understanding them, or really understanding why their car isn't delivering as some of the other cars are. So, yes, Hamilton says, the end of the season can't come soon enough, I'll just put my focus somewhere else, I'm not fighting for the championship, doesn't really matter where we finish, because they're going to be fourth in the constructors anyway. If I finish ahead of George or behind him, you know, it doesn't really matter. If I can finish well and they give me a car that doesn't bounce off the track in the next few races, hopefully we'll get a better result. Looking forward to Christmas, he says. And, like, he was grateful to the team as ever for at least doing their best with the car, but he did say that, like, the car was just atrocious. The weekend, you know, could have easily been a weekend to forget, but at least he did have the Ayrton Senna car drive, so at least he took something away from the weekend, I guess. But, yeah, then he was asked the question, like, what's wrong? What is the problem with the car? Because it seems to be all over the place, and Russell has experienced this too. Yes, Russell was able to put in some great laps this weekend, qualify well, race well, lead the race for a substantial period of time, obviously, in a W15 that we believe was different in some capacity to Hamilton's based on discussions going into the weekend, and certainly seems that way based on the handling, watching the onboards, that Hamilton's car just would not be compliant at all. You know, it's not like Hamilton's washed up. I mean, we've mentioned this at the start of the season, that people are like, oh, I mean, Hamilton's past it. And look, is he in his prime still? No, I wouldn't argue that he is. But he's still shown this year that when he's delivered a car capable of winning races, that he's able to go on and execute, which he did a couple of times still. So, you know, it's not like he is super past it, and nonetheless the W15 was not delivering anything for him. And as he says, like, you tell me what the problem is. That's the $1 million question. But you know, he's probably not all that interested in the answer nowadays, because he knows what his next steps are going to be. And look, he made the comment very clear that the car is the worst that it's ever been. Maybe not his worst car that he's ever driven, but not far away, and largely because well, as he says, no suspension, bouncing on the tyre everywhere, can't get on the power anywhere. The worst ride we've ever had, particularly through the corners. It's so stiff, and it's like driving a plank of wood, he says. But hopefully we won't have any more bumpy tracks. I think the last 3 aren't so bumpy, so I could happily go and take a holiday, he says. But I could go up and happily take a holiday and not bother driving this car anymore. And he says the car was really, really tough. I want to say a big thanks to the guys in the garage for turning up super early in the day. I think that's what he was referring to when he said after the Grand Prix Prix about how, you know, if this was the last time, then, you know, wishing the best and all this. I think he was probably referring to the engineers, like, working hard for him and everything like that. I think he was trying to be grateful there rather than saying that he's going to quit before the end of the season, right? And just say, all right, I'll come back when the SF25, whatever it's going to be called, comes around next year for Ferrari. But the real damning statement in many respects was this one, where he said that the car in 2022 was actually better. So he basically said that, yeah, the car was bouncing in 2022, but like, it was actually a better car. Like, it was more stable car, certainly in Brazil. I mean, they got a 1-2 that time, and it seemed like in 2022 they'd finally got on top of things around about Brazil. Their win there, let's not forget, actually convinced them to stick with the zero pod for the upcoming season in 2023, and then of course that was still a disaster on the W14. So yeah, Hamilton's not a happy man. Although, maybe he is a happy man because he knows that he's going to Ferrari next. And this is why there's still a bit of a grin on that face, is because he knows that Ferrari are making good progress. Now, are Ferrari making good enough progress? Look, they've not consistently been the fastest car, but to be fair, yes, they didn't have the greatest time in Brazil, but the 2 weekends prior, they won both of those Grand Prix in Austin and Mexico relatively comfortably. So clearly, Ferrari have good momentum. And look, would you pick Ferrari or Mercedes to build a better car for next year? There is only one answer there that makes sense. So Hamilton's clearly made a good decision, and it's going to be very interesting to see how Russell and Antonelli can get on, because again, it's like Russell just seems to be pretty unlucky. He joins the greatest team ever, like Mercedes, after their dominant period, and then they just fall off basically as soon as Russell joins, and now his teammate's leaving, and you know, who knows how Antonelli's going to do, but it doesn't seem like the team is necessarily rescuing that direction. So very much interested in your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.